A billionaire walked into her diner, but when his wallet slipped open, she saw something that made her blood run cold, her mother's photo. A simple black woman who had lived an ordinary life, raising her child alone. Her mother had no known ties to wealth or power. So why was her picture in a white billionaire's wallet? Stay tuned to find out the truth that shattered her world, and tell us in comments where you're watching from. The late-night shift dragged on at the quiet diner, the hum of a flickering neon sign outside barely breaking the silence. Zoe Carter wiped down the counter, exhausted but relieved that the night was almost over. Then, the bell above the door jingled. She glanced up, expecting another weary traveler or a local looking for coffee. Instead, a sharply dressed man strode in, his presence commanding. His suit alone probably cost more than her entire yearly rent. He moved with quiet confidence, scanning the diner like someone used to owning every room he entered. Zoe watched as he settled into a booth by the window, his piercing gaze locked on the city streets. When she walked over to take his order, he didn't bother looking at the menu. Black coffee. His voice was low, firm. She nodded, jotting it down. When she returned a few minutes later with his drink, he barely acknowledged her. Used to the indifference of customers, she didn't take it personally. But when he reached for his wallet to pay, something slipped out, a photograph. It fluttered to the floor face up. Zoe's heart stopped. She knew that face. The warm, gentle smile, the kind eyes. Her mother. For a moment, all she could do was stare, her pulse pounding in her ears. Then, before she could stop herself, she bent down and picked it up. "Where did you get this?" Her voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. The man's head snapped up, his cool blue eyes locking onto hers. For the first time, he truly saw her. Zoe turned the photograph toward him, gripping it tightly. "Why do you have a picture of my mother?" His expression flickered just for a second. Then just as quickly, his face became unreadable again. Without a word, he reached for the photograph, his fingers brushing against hers as he took it. "You must be mistaken," he said, tucking it back into his wallet as if it meant nothing. Zoe's stomach twisted. She knew exactly what she had seen. Her mother had kept a near-identical photograph in a small memory box back home. She had memorized every crease, every detail. This wasn't a mistake. "I'm not mistaken," she said firmly. "Why do you have it?" The man exhaled sharply, adjusting the cuff of his expensive suit. "I don't owe you an explanation." Then, before she could react, he stood, placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter, and walked toward the door. Panic surged through her. He was leaving. This might be her only chance to find out the truth. She rushed out from behind the counter, nearly knocking over a tray in her haste. "Wait!" He didn't stop. He was already heading toward a sleek black car parked at the curb, the driver stepping out to open the door. Zoe's heart pounded. "Please, just tell me how you knew her." For a brief moment he paused, his hand resting on the car door. She thought, hoped, he might actually say something. Instead, he turned just enough to meet her gaze, his stare cool, detached. Then, in a voice devoid of emotion, he said, "Forget this." Then he slid into the car, the door shutting behind him. The engine roared to life, and before she could take another step, the vehicle disappeared into the night. Zoe stood frozen on the sidewalk, her breath coming in uneven bursts. A billionaire had just walked into her life and left her with more questions than she could count. Who was he? And why did he have a photograph of her mother? She wasn't letting this go. She was going to find out the truth. Zoe didn't sleep that night. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, her laptop open, searching for any clue about the man from the diner. She didn't know his name. No business card, no receipt with a name. Just his face, his voice, the dismissive way he had looked at her, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. But that photograph changed everything. She started by searching for wealthy business tycoons, real estate moguls, and influential CEOs. Dozens of names flooded her screen, but none matched his face. Her frustration grew. Hours passed. But then, as she was about to give up, she saw him. Richard Lawson, CEO of Lawson Global Enterprises, a billionaire real estate magnate, a man whose empire spanned cities, with his name tied to luxury developments and high-profile deals. Zoe clicked on his image, her breath hitching. It was him. She scrolled through article after article, but nothing linked him to her mother. No past relationships, no known family ties, nothing. Which meant only one thing: he had erased her. Zoe clenched her fists. He had walked into that diner, holding a picture of her mother, and acted as if she didn't exist, as if Evelyn Carter had meant nothing. The thought made her blood boil. She wasn't letting this go. She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to start. The next morning, Zoe boarded the first bus downtown. Her heart pounded as she stepped off in front of a massive glass skyscraper, Lawson Global Enterprises. The building loomed over her, a symbol of wealth and power, but she wasn't intimidated. She walked inside, straight to the reception desk. "I need to see Richard Lawson," she said, her voice steady. The receptionist barely looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Zoe admitted. "But it's important." The woman sighed, unimpressed. "Mr. Lawson doesn't take walk-in meetings." Zoe expected this. She had no appointment, no official reason to be here. If she wanted answers, she'd have to find another way in. Her eyes darted around the lobby. Security guards near the elevators. Employees flashing badges to get through the turnstiles. No way she was getting in the normal way. Then she spotted him, a young man, mid-20s, balancing a coffee cup and folder, heading toward the elevators. He looked distracted. She moved quickly, falling into step beside him. "Hey," she whispered urgently. "Wait up. You forgot to send me that report Mr. Lawson needed." The man blinked, startled. "What?" Zoe sighed in fake exasperation. The report. He was expecting it this morning. Before he could respond, she smoothly stepped forward, walking right through the turnstile just as his badge activated the sensor. The guard barely glanced at her. She was in. Her pulse pounded as she stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. This was it. She was about to come face to face with Richard Lawson, and this time, he wasn't walking away. The elevator doors slid open to the top floor of Lawson Global Enterprises. Zoe stepped out, her breath shallow, hands clenched at her sides. The reception area was sleek, modern, and intimidating. A man in a dark suit approached her instantly. "Miss, do you have an appointment?" "No," she said, "but I need to see Richard Lawson. It's about my mother." The man's jaw tightened. "Mr. Lawson doesn't take walk-ins." Zoe exhaled, her heart pounding. "Tell him my mother's name was Evelyn Carter, and I'm not leaving until I speak to him." The man hesitated before disappearing down a hallway. The minutes stretched endlessly. Then, finally, a door opened. Richard Lawson stepped out. The moment he saw her, something flickered in his gaze. Not surprise, not anger. Something closer to resignation. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. Then, after a long pause, he simply said, "Come with me." Zoe followed him into his office, her heart racing. The moment the door closed, she turned to face him. "Why do you have a picture of my mother?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his desk, pulled out his wallet, and placed the photograph on the table. Zoe stared at it. Then, slowly, her gaze lifted to his. "You knew her," she whispered. Richard met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "I didn't just know her," he said finally. "I loved her." Zoe's world tilted beneath her feet. She had come for answers, but she wasn't prepared for this. Richard leaned against his desk, exhaling sharply. "I loved her," he repeated, his voice carrying the weight of years of regret. "But I walked away." Zoe's chest tightened. "Why?" His jaw clenched. "Because I was a coward. My family made it clear if I stayed with Evelyn, I'd lose everything. The inheritance, the business, my place in their world." Zoe's stomach churned. "So you left her for money?" Richard's gaze darkened. "I thought I could come back for her later when I had secured my future, but by the time I did, she was gone." Zoe's hands curled into fists. Her mother had suffered while this man had lived in luxury. "She never told me about you," she whispered. "Not once." Pain flickered in Richard's eyes. "Because she wanted to protect you. From me." Zoe's breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to process Richard's words. She straightened, staring at him. "So you left her for money?" His gaze darkened. "I thought I could come back for her later when I had secured my future, but by the time I did, she was gone." Zoe's hands curled into fists. Her mother had suffered while this man had lived in luxury. "She never told me about you," she whispered. "Not once." Pain flickered in Richard's eyes. "Because she wanted to protect you. From me." The weight of his confession settled in the room, suffocating in its intensity. Zoe took a shaky breath, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions. She needed space to think, to process. Without another word, she turned and walked out of his office. That night, she searched through her mother's belongings, hoping for answers Evelyn had never given her. As she sifted through old letters and keepsakes, her fingers brushed against something small, a velvet pouch tucked at the bottom of a wooden box. Zoe's breath hitched as she pulled it out and carefully opened it. Inside lay a delicate silver necklace with an engraved pendant. The 3 words, "Forgive, Love, Begin," were carefully etched into the metal, and on the back of the pendant was a small faded photograph, one of her father. A note accompanied it, written in her mother's handwriting. "This belonged to your father. I kept it for you. One day, you will understand." Her hands trembled as she realized the full weight of the truth. Richard Lawson wasn't just a man from her mother's past. He was her father. The next morning, Zoe stood outside the towering glass structure of Lawson Global Enterprises once again, gripping the pendant tightly in her hand. The city buzzed around her, but her mind was locked on one thought. This man was her father. She took a deep breath and marched inside. This time, she wasn't sneaking in. She strode up to the receptionist's desk, her voice steady. "I need to see Richard Lawson. It's urgent." The woman barely glanced at her. "As I said before, Mr. Lawson doesn't take walk-ins." Zoe's hand slammed onto the counter, revealing the pendant. "Then tell him his daughter is here." The receptionist's polite expression faltered. There was hesitation before she finally reached for the phone. Within moments, security guards flanked Zoe, but before they could escort her out, a deep voice cut through the air. "Let her in." Richard stood at the end of the hall, his face unreadable. He turned and walked toward his office without another word. Zoe followed, her pulse hammering. Inside, the doors shut behind her, enclosing them in thick silence. Zoe wasted no time. She placed the pendant on his desk and crossed her arms. "Explain this." Richard stared at the necklace. His fingers hovered over it but never touched it. His jaw tightened, his composure slipping for the first time. "She kept it," he murmured, almost to himself. "She didn't just keep it," Zoe shot back. "She left it for me, along with a note. She never told me who my father was. But this," she gestured at the pendant, "this told me everything." Richard exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "I didn't know," he admitted. "If I had known she was pregnant, if I had known about you." He let the words trail off as if they physically pained him. Zoe's chest ached, but she refused to let sympathy cloud her anger. "But you didn't know, because you left." "I searched for her," Richard said, his voice raw. "By the time I realized what I'd lost, she had disappeared. I hired investigators. No trace. She made sure I wouldn't find her." Zoe swallowed the lump in her throat. That sounded exactly like her mother, protecting her at all costs. But was it really protection, or had it stolen something from her? "She thought she was protecting me from you," Zoe said slowly, testing the words as they left her lips. "She didn't think you deserved to be in my life." Richard flinched. Maybe she was right. Silence hung between them. For the first time, Zoe saw the cracks in his armor. The regret, the sorrow, the years of wondering what could have been. "I can't change the past," Richard said, his voice quieter. "But I can be here now." Zoe's fingers curled around the pendant. "Forgive, love, begin." The words weighed heavy on her. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she admitted. "Not yet." Richard nodded, his expression solemn. "I understand." Zoe took a shaky breath, her mind racing with questions, emotions, uncertainty. But one thing was clear. She wasn't walking away. Not yet. For the first time, she was willing to hear him out. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt like a fragile thread, ready to snap at any second. Finally, Zoe reached for the necklace on the desk and clasped it around her neck. Her mother had left this for a reason. Maybe it wasn't just about Richard. Maybe it was about Zoe, about giving her the choice her mother had never had. Richard's eyes flickered to the pendant, his breath hitching slightly. "She really never stopped thinking about me, did she?" Zoe swallowed hard. "She never stopped protecting me." He nodded, understanding. "I won't ask you to forgive me today, or tomorrow. But if you ever want to know me, not as Richard Lawson, but just as a man who made a terrible mistake, I'll be here." Zoe studied him, searching for deception, for arrogance. She found none, just regret. Just a man who had spent decades haunted by a choice he couldn't take back. She stepped back, her fingers brushing the pendant once more. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted. A small, almost sad smile crossed Richard's lips. "Neither do I, but maybe that's okay." Zoe nodded. Then, with one last glance, she turned and walked toward the door. Not running, not storming away, just leaving, on her own terms. She wasn't ready to call him her father. But she wasn't closing the door either. Maybe some things weren't meant to be rewritten. But maybe, just maybe, they could be rewritten together. Zoe nodded. Then, with one last glance, she turned and walked toward the door. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if she were carrying not just her own pain, but the weight of years lost. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, but she didn't look back. Not because she didn't care, but because some wounds weren't meant to heal overnight. She walked away, not to erase the past, but to decide if she was ready to rewrite the future. She wasn't ready to call him her father, but she wasn't closing the door either. Maybe some things weren't meant to be rewritten, but maybe, just maybe, they could be rewritten together. Zoe's story is proof that the past doesn't have to define the future. Sometimes healing isn't about forgetting, it's about deciding what comes next. What do you think Zoe should do? Should she fully let Richard into her life and give him a chance to be the father she never had, or is it better to keep her distance and move forward without him? Can love and regret truly heal old wounds, or are some scars too deep to mend? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think is the best ending for this story. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.